Hello everyone, my name is Beck Tench and this is Elizabeth Fleming and we're from the Museum of Life and Science and it's located in Durham. We're here today to talk to you about Experimonth, which is a project that we're working on at the museum. Here's some Twitter information regarding myself, Elizabeth, and the museum. So to give you an idea of what Experimonth actually is, I wanted to give you how it began. It began with my New Year's resolutions as a personal project in 2008-2009. And I asked friends on Twitter and Facebook to suggest things that I could do to resolve in the new year. And then they voted them up and down, and I picked the top 12 and mapped them out across the year and asked people to join with me in the endeavor to try to do these things. So, for example, one of them was to eat a completely raw diet. Another one was to write a haiku every day. Another one was to watch no TV for a month, that sort of thing. This is a couple of examples of what that manifested as. Several of my colleagues joined me in the raw diet Experimonth, and we blogged about what it was like to eat, especially in January, only raw food. This was October chest to push-ups every day for the month of October, and we used a completely different technology in this example, a Google Doc, to chart and comment on our progress. So that was in 2009, and we did 12 that year, and then 12 another in 2010, and then in April of 2011, we joined with a scientist, Frances Altman, blonde there, to do an Experimonth at the museum, like an official Experimonth. And the Experimonth that we did, she's a psychologist she was at the School of Medicine at UNC, now she's at Duke, to chart and understand mood and emotion. So we texted people 5 times a day, every day for a month, and asked them one question, which was, text us your mood 1 low to 10 high. And about 180 people signed up to do it. Beginning of the month, we had 154 at the end of the month, so we retained most of our people. And they were over 80% compliant throughout the month in texting their mood to us, which some researchers have contacted us to see how that actually works, because that's generally not the case for mood data or any other kind of research data. This was the sketch of the website that we proposed people would be getting whenever they signed up, which is basically one side here is your mood, and the other side is a blog about mood and the science of emotions. And these are some examples of what the data actually looked like. This was someone's day, someone's week, the variance in time periods throughout the day. And this spaghetti plot is everyone charted against days of the week, and then your particular line so you can see where you were in the context of the whole community. Here's some stats about that. I think I've mostly mentioned all that. The only thing I wanted to add was that about a quarter of our people, in addition to texting, commented on the blog that we were blogging at the time, and that comment ratio was about 4 comments to every person who commented on the blog. That was a WordPress blog that we created. The second Experimonth that we did was just in November, and it's called Experimonth Race. So we have an exhibit that's wrapping up this weekend at the museum about race and ethnicity. And so we wanted to explore what it would be like to have discussions about race, and also what it would be like to do an Experimonth on Facebook and only use Facebook to do it. For this time, we wanted to also add an artist. We think that there's some interesting offerings that artists had. So we got a local artist, Dave Also Brooks, who is known for doing some interesting and provocative work in race in his art, and then April Harris-Britt, who talks about childhood development and racial identity. This is a board that was after a talk that we had together. It was Elizabeth and I and April and Dave, and figuring out what would we do if we were to design an Experimonth around race. And what we ended up with was this sort of choose your own adventure. There were 8 different activities that you could sign up to do. You could sign up to read the news every day and post news articles that mentioned race, or take pictures of things that evoked race, or give a child in your life, a baby doll of a different ethnicity. And one of the more popular things that we did was to create a game called Smart, Hot, Honest or Not, which was you take your picture and we morph it into a version of you as another race, put that in a voting engine, and you're asked to, how honest is this person, or how attractive is this person, or how smart is this person, and then you can see how people rate you as your own ethnicity, and that's a completely different one. Every activity had a Facebook group that went along with it, and so we had 8 different Facebook groups. We had 8. We had 8 different Facebook groups, and there was also a confessional where you could go and post, not as yourself, if you had something that you wanted to say that you didn't want to have your Facebook identity associated with. There were around the same amount of people, 216 people who participated in an Experimonth race. With the co-hosts and the participants, over 1,000 comments generated. 610 of them were from participants. Again, we had about a quarter of the people actually engage in having dialogue about race. But on Facebook, there was an 11-to-1 ratio instead of a 4-to-1 ratio on WordPress. We're not exactly sure if that observation is due to the topic or to the social network, but we're studying that. In addition to what we're studying is, I know you can't read this, something I can't spend a whole lot of time talking about, but I wanted to mention it. If you have questions, find me later. For both experiments that we've done at the museum, we're studying them with a research group out of Michigan State University called Writing in Digital Environments. And they're a rhetorical analysis, or they're rhetoricians, and they study rhetoric through rhetorical analysis. So what they're doing is they're taking everything that people are saying about Experimonth and they're coding it based on moves like argumentation and identity. And they're also studying everything that we're doing as facilitators. For example, maybe we're facilitating a Facebook comment by being provocative, or maybe we're facilitating one by showing empathy, and studying the effects and patterns that they see based on those facilitative moves. And I think it's a really interesting area of research, and also an area of measuring change and learning online. So happy to talk more about that with you guys. Now I'm going to hand it over to Elizabeth, who's going to talk about the next couple of years and where we're headed with Experimonths.
Yeah, so with Experimonths, we're continuing the study that Beck mentioned in the discourse analysis. We also are just starting a new project called Science of Sharing. And this is an NSF grant-funded project through the ISE branch of NSF, which is Informal Science Education. And we're partnering with the Exploratorium out of San Francisco, and to really dive into social science, social psychology, behavioral economics, and develop a variety of exhibits and activities and even experimonths about topics ranging from competition and cooperation to trust and motivation, and really a range of social science topics, which is really cool because it's something new for us, at least in the science museum field, who tend to gravitate more towards physical science. And so basically what it means is that we get to learn a lot about that interesting area of science, and in doing so, develop 4 Experimonths. So as a part of this project, we're going to have 4 Experimonths over the next 3 years, and so we're really early in this project and still doing some project planning, and we're really in like the brainstorming phase, kind of blue skies, like what anything goes, just really jumping into the research and trying to learn a lot about the topic, see what would be fun to do as potential Experimonth topics, talking to researchers in the field, some of our advisors, and the next step would be to do prototyping. And so what we're going to do is do a series of Experimonths that we're going to beta test, have some beta Experimonths, see how the topics play out and if they're really engaging, and those will inform the 4 Experimonths that we do. And so Beck and I have decided to capture all of our brainstorming on Twitter. So follow us at Experimonth, and we've been tweeting ideas of what could be cool experimental topics related to this social science topic. We've actually kind of made our own Experimonth throughout the month of January and February. She and I are each challenging ourselves to come up with an idea a day and tweet it. So follow us there and give us ideas if you have some, or give us feedback. Some things that have come up so far is about yawning. So let's see how many people start yawning now that we're talking about it. But this is some social contagion research that's out there, and I'm interested to see if that could be doable daily for a month. This idea is inspired by the work of Dan Ariely, author of Predictably Irrational. And since he's at Duke, he's one of our advisors on the project, and we're hoping to work closely with him and other researchers to ask them, like, what's cool about your work and what would be like feasible for someone to do on a daily basis and be motivated to do and fulfilling and get something out of. For example, like a lot of these ideas so far are coming out of papers that Beck and I are reading, and it's something that is an actual science experiment that someone's done. But how can we adapt that to something that anybody could do in their daily life and get something out of? So, for example, send out a bunch of holiday cards to strangers, and who sends them back? Well, there's been a study about that, and a surprising percentage of people send a holiday card back to that scientist who did that study. And so, briefly, just as part of that project, that Science is Sharing project, we're also going to be developing exhibit components that go along with each Experimonth. And that's something we kind of started to do with the Experimonth race in November. That was the first time we tried to have a physical presence on the floor of the museum for the Experimonth, and where we were not only where we were actively designing and conducting the experiments with our visitors and displaying the data, but also trying to see maybe what people wanted to do as a topic. And the Smart Hot Honest or Not game that Beck mentioned, during the month of November, we had a photo booth on the floor that people could contribute their picture, and had iPads out for people to play the game, and had an interactive where people could match different paint swatches to their skin color and put it up, and we shared these visualizations on Facebook. So we're going to continue that idea and see how we can prototype some hands-on interactive exhibit components alongside each Experimonth that live on the museum floor, both at our place in Durham and in San Francisco at the Exploratorium. So that's where we're headed with Experimonths. Let us know if you guys have any questions.
Yeah, we have a few minutes if anybody has any questions.
Or ideas for experiments.
Or ideas for experiments.
That would be awesome.
Well, I mean, how do you come up with ideas for experiments?
So far, our process has been to have a domain, the domain of mood or the domain of race, or now the domain of social science, find experts in the area, and really be the conduit between them and the public to figure out an experience. A good example is to have a rigorous experience while also having something that we're not having, for example, a control group that doesn't have the experience because there needs to be rigor. So it's this interesting little middle space, but that's so far how we come up with that.
And I think otherwise, especially starting from the personal Experimonths in 2009, what do you want to try, and you like as a New Year's resolution, even that you might not can do for a year, and something that's feasible to do daily, and that you kind of can make a hypothesis of like, what would this change in your life if you recorded your mood 5 times a day? Could you get something out of that? So, yeah.
I think it's really cool that you're taking, studies that have been done and giving people a way to access it and actually try something and connect with it themselves. Are you then making the connection back to the study, or if someone tries the yawning thing, then do they have a link to the article that was published, or is the researcher aware that people are trying these things?
Yeah. In the mood Experimonth, we definitely did that on the blog. Beck showed some of the visualizations that we were sharing of the community data, but we also had probably every other day or something like that, we're doing blog posts about the research. I was working with our researcher and to get suggestions of papers to read, and then we're blogging about it to connect, like if people were realizing things about their mood as they were tracking it, how did that connect to the research on positive emotion and tying that back in? Yes, and that's something we're continuing to try to figure out how to do best.
Have you ever engaged with people that are doing live logging sort of things?
Yeah, in fact, that was our first boon of participants, was the Quantified Self blog blogged about the experiment, and we had a whole bunch of people from that movement, and which was a different audience than we were anticipating, but really cool, and it's a source of interesting ideas. Yeah, I personally am sort of a quantified selfer, so I'm already kind of biased towards doing stuff like that too.
Just off the top of my head, I can see an experiment, Experimonth with like a group who normally tweets and a group who is discomforted by tweeting a week. And just one tweet every day. We would have to teach them how to tweet, but the discomfort, the social, get some introverts, some extroverts. Do they change their comfort level, and are there things that you could do to change it? And you could even follow it up past the month to see if it actually did change who they were interacting with, how they were able to engage. They might take it to their hobbies and social activities and benefit from it.
Yeah, and interestingly, a lot of thinking that I've been doing about these upcoming experiments is around getting people who tweet all the time to not. It could be an interesting complement to that, to have both sides to see what the two have to say at the end. And the other interesting thing that you bring up is this follow-up idea. And I think that we're planning on contacting the people who participated in Mood this April, just to see where they are with how they think about mood. An interesting thing, there's so much measurable about experiments, but what we're learning is that a lot of the experience of experimenting happens in your social life, and it's not documented. And as a museum trying to understand the impacts of it, we're trying to get at what does that look like, and is that what we're after in terms of our mission, which is science is the way of knowing. So it's interesting things. If you have any questions, follow us on Twitter or come see us. We'll be at the banquet.